Hi, my friends, and welcome to Master of Horror, where I give you the most scariest stories that I've ever come by. These are 3 scary true Skinwalker stories. Number 41. Please enjoy these stories with thunderstorm sounds. Okay, my friends, let's begin. Paranormal True Story Number 1. This happened when I was 15 years old, when I lived near my aunt and uncle. They lived on a farm in the middle of Washington in a small town. My grandmother and I lived in a cottage about 100 feet from the main house, and my grandma had a dog named Maggie. She's about 7 years old. I had just finished making my bed on the couch. This house was very small. Everything can be seen from the front window. I was right underneath that window. So, I finally drifted off to sleep as my family was watching a movie. I then woke up and everything was dark. But the thing was, I heard the dog walking around outside my window. I brushed it off and decided to go to the restroom. I realized there was no dog outside, and my grandma's room door was closed. The dog always sleeps with my grandma. The restroom was unfortunately on the other side of the house, in the far corner of the property. So, I decided to just go ahead and use the restroom behind a tree. I didn't want to go outside alone, so I crept into my grandmother's room and grabbed the dog. As we walked out the front door, the dog ran from me, straight to the edge of the road, and just stared into the woods. I yelled for her to get back, but she wouldn't. She sat and stared into the woods. I had to go and grab her and drag her back to the house. When I reached her, I decided to look where she was looking, and I saw nothing. I quickly used the restroom and went back into the house. I put Maggie back in my grandma's room and went to sleep. It was about 3:15 in the morning. I woke up sometime later by the sound of a dog walking around outside again. So I got up and saw that my grandma's room door was open, so I thought it was Maggie. But then I looked towards the front door and it was wide open, and I froze in fear. I clearly remember locking the front door. I found the courage to look outside, so I went and walked through the open front door, and I saw a trail of red starting from the door to the road. I followed the trail into the woods, and then I saw Maggie in a tree, and I looked up. To my horror, something was holding her. It was a tall-looking man, I thought at first, but had very distorted features, and then I realized it looked like a deer head with the man's body. Terrified, I quickly ran back into the cottage, and I yelled for my family, and they ran out of the rooms, and I explained what I had seen to them. So my dad went out and I followed him. He froze in fear right in front of me, and he turned around and ran back into the house. I chased him, and he had told me what he had seen and described the same thing as me. The next day, we packed up and left. I haven't been back ever since.
Scary, true paranormal story number 2.
A few years ago, in 2009, while I was still in high school, I was at a party with some friends in a cabin out in the woods. As the night goes on, around 2 in the morning, me and my friend Caleb decided to go outside to have a cigarette. The second we go out there, there's just this completely awful smell, like decay or something rotting. This was in the middle of nowhere, so we just figured it was a dead animal and went on having our cigarette. Less than a minute later, we hear something moving in the dark, and sure enough, a deer comes into the very edge of the porch light. But then I noticed something. One of its legs was messed up in a bad way. It looked broken in multiple places. So my friend and I are slightly put off by this and finish up our cigarettes and begin to head back inside the cabin. However, right as we start to do that, one of the 2 porch lights pop and then goes out. So now there's less light outside. The deer goes back into the darkness. A bit giddy, we both begin to laugh. We then turn around and open the back door and begin to go inside. And that's when we heard it. An undeniable sound of nails scratching on the concrete patio right behind us. We both slowly turn around and see this hunched over huge black coyote. It looked like a creature doing this very slow, unnatural crawl toward us. It has red glowing eyes. We go from 0 to 100. Paralyzed with fear, we stay stuck there just staring at this creature coming towards us until another one of our friends playfully pulls us through the open doorway, telling us to get back to the party. This guy literally saved our lives. To this day, I've never experienced anything like that, and it's one of the most horrifying things I've ever seen.
Paranormal True Story number 3.
Last night, I had an experience with what I truly believe to be a skinwalker. I was sleeping on my couch because I'm in the process of remodeling my bedroom. It had been storming on and off all night, but in that moment, the wind was also blowing really hard. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when I was awoken by a very strange noise. It sounded like an animal call, except as if a human was making a howling sound. It was a deep noise. It sounded like it was right outside my window in my backyard. In case y'all are wondering, I live in the country near the Ozark Mountains and directly on the Trail of Tears. I've lived out there in the middle of the woods my whole life. I've heard and seen everything from bears, cougars, deer, raccoons. But the sound that I heard that night wasn't like anything that I've ever heard before. I'm not gonna lie, it scared the absolute hell out of me. I immediately went to my bedroom. I have a window looking towards my backyard as well. I wanted to see whatever it was, but I didn't want to pull back my window curtains to come face to face with whatever it was. So I turned around and started walking back to the living room. Then something hit my window, as if trying to get my attention. It wasn't hard enough to break it. It sounded like someone or something threw a small rock at my bedroom window. I walked over to my window and pulled back the curtain slowly. I didn't know what I was gonna see on the other side of that window. Then once I pulled back the curtains to get a clear view, I was frozen in fear. What I saw still terrifies me to this day. It was a black shadow-like creature with antlers and white glowing eyes. It was at least 6 feet tall. It was only about 12 inches from my face, right on the other side of that window. The hairs on my arms went straight up. I quickly closed the curtain and ran to the living room, where I decided to stay the rest of the night. I prayed myself to sleep. While I was sleeping on the couch that same night, I heard another noise coming from the living room window this time. At that point, I covered my head with a blanket and forced myself to go back to sleep. Surprisingly, I was able to ignore the sounds even though I was petrified. Looking back on it, I wish I could have recorded it. I tried recording it when the noise came back the next night, but every time I took out my phone, everything stopped. Today, I built up enough courage to go into my backyard and do investigations there. Last night, I had a barbecue and went to bed around 2:30 in the morning. I heard a noise coming from the backyard, and when I went back there, I was shocked to find the barbecue pit upside down on the ground with all the ashes spread out on the ground. There was trash and broken tree limbs everywhere. It wasn't windy that night either. I did some research and I think it's a skinwalker. I'm no stranger to these things. I've heard lots of stories about them, and considering that I've seen several things walking through the woods through my lifetime, I'm starting to become really convinced. Thank you, my friends, for listening to Master of Horror, the channel that brings you the most scariest true paranormal stories that are out there. Please message me what type of paranormal stories you would like for me to cover on my next video. I hope you enjoyed these 3 true Skinwalker stories with thunderstorm sounds. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, my friends, till next time.
And don't forget to leave the nightlight on.